welcome to Dazatron's Diorama Llama and this new video on how to make a jagged rock formation. It's actually a really simple base that you can make. In fact, it might even be the easiest of all the bases that I've shown you so far. So for this, you just need some offcuts. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to show you how to use some of these little bits that you've kind of cut off in the creation and maybe some of the other bases if you've had a go already. If you haven't, I'd encourage you to have a go at some of those first and then come back to this one once you've accumulated some of these kind of little bits and pieces that you don't need anymore, but don't throw them away. And I do usually say that in my other videos, keep all your offcuts because they will come in. You'll also need a knife as usual. This is a floristry knife, but you could use any kitchen knife, that would be fine, as long as it's nice and sharp, really important. So a knife sharp, that is also handy. For this video, you're also going to need some glue. I haven't actually used glue in any of my videos before, and I've never tested this, but I have been told Gorilla Glue is some of the best glue out there for sticking foam together. So I'm going to give that a whirl and I'll let you know how it goes. You will need a figure to put onto your base and just kind of see what space you need on the base itself. So this is my version of Hubcap. So this is my first custom paint job, which is not too shabby. Yeah, not easy at all, so respect to all you customizers out there. Really tricky taking some of these guys apart and sanding them down and preparing them ready for paint, so I've had a go at doing that, and I've had fun doing it. And I encourage you to have a go. Just find a cheap transformer and just turn him into something different, and that was my aim with this. I really liked the alt mode for Hubcap, which is based on a Willys 77, and I just thought it looked really cool. But I thought, he was bright orange, so I wanted to change his colour scheme, add some kind of hot rod type flames on there, and he's come out pretty cool. So I thought I would make a base for this guy using some of the offcuts that I've already had from my previous videos. So the first thing you're going to need is a piece of styrofoam, again an offcut, that you can use to build the kind of jagged rocks on top of. So this one, as you can see, it's not neat and tidy. I haven't purposely made it this way, but it's ideal then for a rock formation base. So that's what I'm using, but you could use anything really you've got. In some cases you might have to cut it down, so that's quite a thick piece there. So use what's at hand, and if you need to use a fresh piece of styrofoam just for the base part, then do so. And again, if you look at some of my other videos, you'll see how to use a electric foam cutter for cutting out some more interesting shapes, but you could do it with a saw. It would work just as well. So I've got my base, I've got my bits and pieces to start cutting into. So take one of your offcuts and you just want to basically slice off a chunk of this. So you want a reasonably flat bottom, so you've got a good surface to kind of stick to the base. So I'm just going to, this has already got this kind of flat bottom here, so I'm going to use that as my base, and I'm just going to slice a piece off. Now again, you can use whatever tools you've got at hand to do this. Just be careful. So I've now got this kind of pointy, almost kind of like pyramid shape. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of rough this up a little bit more. So I'm just going to cut into this just so it's not completely smooth. So I've just gone round each side again, just to kind of cut that a little bit more, because I don't want it to look perfect. That's the thing about rocks, you know, they're kind of natural formations, so they shouldn't look like it's been cut with a knife basically. So once you've got some kind of rough shape there, as I said, I wanted it jagged, so I've gone for this kind of pyramid kind of shape. You just need to take some of your foil, just pull a bit off, scrunch it up, and all that's going to do is it's going to transfer this texture from the foil to the, I suppose, this kind of rock that we're making here. So I'm just going to push this into each side. You're going to have to press quite firmly. And then what I tend to do, because as I'm pushing this foil into here, obviously it's flattening the foil, so it's removing some of the texture from there, but it is still transferring that. I don't know if you can kind of see those little dents in there. And then I tend to just kind of scrape the foil across the sides as well, and I just think that kind of adds a more natural look to it. You only tend to want to go in one direction when you're doing that, otherwise you'll get a kind of a cross formation effect, and you don't want that. And just kind of pull off any kind of bits, and again you can kind of dent the edges because you don't want these to be super sharp. So I'm just going over with a bit of foil just to put some kind of nooks into the edges of that, and you can see already that's looking more natural. And then I could add that then to my base here. So even just with these few rocks on there, already even just that look is looking more interesting. So I'm gonna come off the video now. I'm gonna make a few more of these. Okay, so I'm not quite finished, but I just thought I'd show you where I'm at the moment. You can see it's come on a long way since the first few were put onto the base, and none of this is stuck down yet, and I think that's really important at this stage, is just to place some of the bits that you've got on there and just see how it looks. Is it working? Is there a variety of kind of shadows and textures going on? So you can see I've got this really small piece here. I've got this kind of very thin kind of piece which I've just kind of slotted in between another two, and I just think that makes it look more realistic in many ways. Also check it out from different angles, and move things around if you're not happy. That's the great thing at this point, is move things around. One of the things, or a tip I would suggest, is to have a larger rock somewhere, just so that you can kind of pose your figures in a few more ways. So you can kind of, have the foot resting on top of that, or you could have a minifigure on top of that as well if you wanted to. So it just gives you a bit more variety. So I would suggest having a larger rock. So as you go along and you start creating this diorama, you're going to end up with even smaller offcuts. And again, in the attitude of not throwing anything away, you can still use some of these bits. I'm going to cut off the edge of that. And it's just quite useful to have some of these smaller stones or rocks in place. And just by cutting it, you can see already there's a texture there. And when you're cutting, don't be afraid to kind of like chip things off. Don't feel you've got to do a neat cut every time. And the same method as we did before, just use your foil just to rub over the top or press it into the surface and just kind of texturize, if that's a word, your styrofoam so it looks more rock-like, and then you end up with a little rock that can go on the bottom somewhere, and just keep building up your stones in that way. Right, so here's my setup. It's not finished because it's not glued down yet. I just wanted to show you what it looks like at this stage in a bit more detail. One of the things I do want to mention is the silhouette. So this is just, if you like, the outline of the formations. So I wanted this kind of jagged look. So I think that's really important, particularly when you're thinking about where you're going to pose your character. So for me, this would likely be on my shelf from this kind of angle, with the two large rocks at the front, and then these kind of jagged rocks pointing out at the side. And that's the look I want to go for, and that's really important, is when you're placing your rock formations, that you think about, where do I want this to sit, how do I want it to look, do I want it to look quite threatening, have I got enough space to actually put my figure in place. So he will slot in there. I'm just going to do it quite carefully because otherwise he'll knock all those over. So I'm not going to place him in properly, but I have checked if he will fit in there. So you can see from above, you just turn it around that way, actually, it'll make it a bit easier to see. You can see I've got that space there, which is where my character will stand, and there's also room for him to have his feet planted on the rocks if you want to pose him in differently. Right, so the next bit is the gluing part. So I'm just going to put that back down here, just so you can see it on screen. Move my figure out of the way. With this Gorilla Glue, it does tell you to wear gloves, because obviously you don't want to get it on your skin. It will bond with fabric as well, so again, you might want to wear some old clothes. Other things you might need is a rag, so you can kind of do a bit of cleanup if you need to. It does tell you to use a spray bottle. For this particular Gorilla Glue, I don't know if this is the same with all types, but this is activated with water, even though it's waterproof at the end. Once it cures, it activates with water. So one side you need to dampen with a spray bottle or a damp cloth, and then the other part that you want to bond to that needs to be dry, and that's where you apply your glue. It actually, that particular Gorilla Glue does come with some gloves, but I already had some, so I'm just using those for the moment. Okay, so what I'm going to do, rather than taking everything off, because I've got an idea where I want things, I want to glue one piece at a time, and I think that just makes it a bit easier. One thing I will say, I'm quite happy with this offcut that I've used for the main part of the base. I actually quite like the way the electric foam cutter has kind of cut these ridges in there. I haven't done that on purpose, that's just as I'm kind of moving the cutter around, it kind of creates these ridges, but I actually think that works quite well. And what I might do is just use a bit of PVA and some sand just in between the rocks to kind of make that look more interesting. What you could do, if you've got a surface like this which is reasonably smooth, again using the foil, you could just kind of push that into the top of that surface, and that would just give it a texture if you don't want it to look so smooth. So that is a technique you can use, which I haven't done on this one, but you could do that if you wanted to. So I'm going to start with this bigger rock here. So I think I'm going to have to dampen actually this bit here. So what I might need to do is just put a few sprays of this on there, because you only want it moist. So I'm just going to put a bit of moisture onto this bit there. Do that again. So just in the area where I want this rock to be placed. And now I'm going to take my glue. And of course, whatever type of glue you're using, you'll have to read the instructions to see what to do with that. So I'm just going to take this flat side here. To be fair, it might be an idea to even sand that down first, but I'm just going to put some of this onto the surface here. I'm quite happy with that. It's probably quite a large amount there, but we'll go with that. So just think about what angle you want this to be placed in. Now, this particular glue gives you about 10 to 15 minutes to keep kind of moving things around, so I think that's ample time. And then it cures for the most part within 2 hours. So I think it says 1 to 2 hours it will be 80% cured, and then to leave it overnight to be fully cured. So I'm quite happy with that there. So I'm just going to move this piece out and then just repeat the process. And so all of my pieces are in place. I'm pretty happy with that. What I might do is add a few more small rocks, just in this kind of empty gap here. But that's looking pretty cool. One of the things to be aware of that I've noticed with this Gorilla Glue, I think it's because it reacts with water. It seems to create a foam. So if I just turn that round, I don't know if you can see, it's starting to kind of ooze out now underneath the bottom of the rocks, and obviously I don't want that effect, so just be aware of that. So I'm just going to use the end of like a kebab stick and just the wet rag here, just to kind of pull out some of that. So I'm just going in there with the stick and just pulling some of that excess kind of glue off there. It's better to do that now in this kind of first 10 to 15 minutes, because although I can cover up a bit of that with things like sand, it's nice to see some of those creases underneath the rocks, because it just gives a nicer finish to the piece. So I'm just going to go around and tidy that up a little bit more, but you might have to do that a number of times depending on how much glue you put on there. So I think next time I do this I will put on less glue. Now I know, but that might be different with other types of glue, so just something to consider. And then just to finish up, just make sure you wipe the nozzle with a damp cloth. So I just thought I'd show you off the final sculpt before any paint has been added. So here he is in place. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment below. See you next time.